Now, I'm delighted to say alongside me is the Hereford Chairman, Chris Ammonds, who, if you were listening midweek, you were expecting a slot from Chris prior to the game against Shrewsbury, but he didn't quite manage it, but he's here now. Welcome along, Chris.
Thank you, and I will offer my sincere apologies to you, Keith, for standing you up on Tuesday night, and to anybody out there who was desperate to hear from me. I have no excuses. I just completely forgot ahead of the game. And it was only when I saw you at full time near the tunnel, I went, may have said a naughty word to myself. And I did say I'll come up on Saturday. And thankfully today I've remembered.
And here you are.
Absolutely.
First question, what have you made of the rebuild, let's put it that way, from Aaron and Harry?
The proof is in the pudding, I guess, isn't it, when the season itself starts. But I have been incredibly impressed with the way they've gone about their work this summer. I mean, it's probably fair to say that the work started before the end of last season in their minds, and although we didn't, agree and deals for them to stay this season until, the last week of last season, I think they'd already started spreadsheets and files of people they'd seen play over the end of last season. They were already beginning to think of how they wanted to play, who would fit into their style. And I've just been really, really impressed with the way they've gone about their work. There's every addition they've made seems to have been very well thought through. And I'm not saying any signing isn't well thought through, but it always is almost a bit like they're trying to piece together a jigsaw. They know what they want in terms of high energy, athleticism. They clearly want some physicality as well, but just the way they've gone about it, and if they've gone for a player, and we have missed out on players because the market has been ridiculous at times, but they've always had a second option and a third option that they can pick up who they know is of a similar ilk. It might not be first choice, but actually, financially, if you can't get your first choice, then you are going to have to look a little bit further down. But they've always seemed to be in control of where they wanted to go, and it's been really heartening, really impressive. They've, I speak to Aaron at least once or twice every day with an update on where he is with certain individuals. This one's, this person's suddenly become available. We're going to have a look at what we want to do, and it's just been really good. The work they've done has been remarkable. Obviously, poor old Harry was in traction for 3 weeks because he had his knee operation, so he didn't move from a laptop for 3 weeks in terms of looking at stats and things. So that was probably quite handy because it takes a lot to keep him still. But yeah, no, it's been really good, and from what I've seen, I'm heartened by what I've seen so far on the field.
They are predominantly young, keen, enthusiastic players who maybe have dropped a little bit in the pyramid system, but they know they've come to a club where if they do excel, they're going to get noticed. We only had to look back a couple of short months ago, and Cormac Daly, Monday as well. I mean, the option is there. If you do really well, you will get noticed. If you go to a smaller club, you're not really going to generate that crowd really to get behind you and test you in terms of numbers. You're not coming and playing in front of, shall we say, 400 or 500 supporters. It's a bit different. The expectation level always different at Edgar Street. And every player that's been brought in has either been a player of the year, player of the season, manager's player of the year, that sort of thing. So the standard might be from a league below in a couple of cases, or from academy systems and under 21 systems higher up the pyramid. So they've all got work to do in their careers, but as Harry said, we don't want players here who are comfortable playing at this level. We want players that want to progress.
I think it's a really interesting thing, actually. I can cover a few things, Keith. I think I'm probably a bit old school in my thinking sometimes, or I have been. I'm a bit like you need some physical players for this league. We've watched it. You, like me, watched it for any number of years, and it can be quite a physical league. But actually, when I've been reflecting on it, I think it has moved away from that a little bit than it has been. There are clearly we know the ones we're talking about, the physical teams, don't we? But I think there are more teams who are going down a different route.
I think you're talking the Alfretons of this world.
I wouldn't, they have gone.
Apparently, I think half of the Alfreton squad is now at Ratcliffe.
Yeah, well,
so I think Ratcliffe could be the new Alfreton.
Well,
but we'll wait and see.
Well, on the game we saw at the end of last season, they were the new Alfreton anyway, Keith, weren't they? That game at Edgar Street, to be fair. But I think so. I am a little bit old school in that way. But I think now, I learned a lot with the way the loanees performed for us last year, because those loanees we had last season, a couple, George Munday was brought in by Runes and Cormac was brought in by Paul before that, but then we got the two lads from Cheltenham and we had Mikey Lane, and I think I kind of learnt a lot from that actually, because they came in, they played without fear, they didn't have scarring from what had gone before, and actually I think they lifted everyone off the field, but also I think they gave the senior players a lift on the field as well, and actually a lot of the senior players played their best football because they were lifted by them. So I think I'm now looking at a younger group and thinking actually that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get beaten up or going to get bullied. There will be days inevitably when it's harder, and that's just football, isn't it? But I really like what we've gone for. I like the profile. When Aaron and Harry go for a player, whether it's a young player, they always look for 4 or 5 references, be that someone who's played alongside, someone who's played against, someone who's someone who's at their club currently. They're incredibly well connected, and of course Harry's only stopped playing in the last 18 months, so pretty much any player in those lower leagues, if you like, and in the National League, Harry can find someone who's played with them or against them and get some proper references. We've obviously brought a couple in from Alvechurch, and Christian Pearce was there, who they're good friends with, so they were able to get a good reference on Joe Willis. They were able to get a good reference on Will Merritt, who we've been waiting on for a couple of weeks and who came in on Tuesday, which is great. And I think that's, you're not going to get everything right, but the more due diligence that you do, the more chance you've got. And what they've gone for is they've gone for, even if players have come from a low level, they're players that they've been told or reassured are ready to make the step up. That's great. And on the point about coming here as an attractive proposition, I'm in that fortunate position. I get to speak to some of the sort of loan managers and people from clubs, and actually they talk about the fact they can send a lad to Hereford and there's a pressure.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
They're not just coming to play football, because most of the lads are decent footballers and they're decent technically. Yeah. But how are they going to go and deal with playing in front of 3,000 people every home game?
That's the test they've
and
never
the expectation, as you said, and that's what they can find out about them. We were fortunate last year that the lads we had in all came into that environment and thrived. And it's fantastic that George and Cormac have gone on to get really big moves. And I think the way the lads performed on Tuesday, I didn't sense any fear in front of 2,000 people, in what was probably the most unfriendly friendly I've seen in quite a while. In those first 75 minutes, it was a really intense game. So again, we're looking for, we're still in the loan market. We're hoping for at least a couple more, but we are an attractive proposition now. And we've now got shining examples of what we've done for some players, which is really, really great.
I would give credit to Aaron for the way he's compiled the pre-season friendlies. I mean, he said to us, well, I was doing it anyway, even if I didn't get the job, because as far as I'm concerned, that was my role at the time, and I want this club to be ready, or the squad to be ready, even if I'm here, not even here. So he's built the pre-season friendlies in a way that, you've got all the youngsters predominantly at the start of the pre-season mix, and it's built up over time, and he knew pretty much that Shrewsbury were going to be very competitive, and a test for Hereford squad. And likewise today, Bromsgrove are a more direct team. I know they've got 7 or 8 players from Hensford who've just come up because they've retained their part-time status. Hensford have gone full-time, and that's why they're here. But there's some really good players. So it will be a very big test. And in the Balls cast that we've put out with Aaron, he was saying, look, you can't predict what type of team you're going to play on the first day. So we didn't know we were going to play Buxton, but there'll be a totally different style to what you see this afternoon from Bromsgrove. So he's built in, I've got to play against someone who gets the ball down and plays it 1 week, and then I need to play against somebody who's going to be ultra aggressive, direct. Even Bishop's Cleeve, when they were up against the young under 18 team, you suddenly saw what Bishop's Cleeve were all about, Their one defender, I think, was 6'6". Yeah. So
it was like Dan Byrne. We decided it was like Bishop's Cleeve
it was like Dan Byrne. Two of the under-18s needed to get on each other's shoulder to 100%. Head the ball away. So it was a bit unfortunate in that way, but I'm sure they've taken a lot from it, the under-18s, and what it's enabled is the players to build minutes up. It's only really Aaron Skinner who's on the bench this afternoon, who's not featured in the pre-season build-up, and likes Carl Hawkins. After he had a bit of a layoff, he's back in with minutes. He can't play next week, so that's why he's probably not in the starting lineup this afternoon.
Oh, I mean that the way the pre-season has been put together reflects the level of planning that they are doing in all areas. Really, he sat down and explained it to us as a board. Talked about, right, I want games where we're going to have a lot of the ball. I want games where we're going to almost have to sit in a little bit more because there's going to be possession from the other side. I want a mix of everything so we can try and test everything. One of the things I really liked was we were talking about the under-18s, and obviously it is difficult when you're trying to build a squad, so you've only maybe got 14 or 15 senior players, and then you lose 2 with injuries like Joe and Finn. You are going to be reliant on under-18s. But Aaron said to me, he said, listen, I could go and bring in 7 or 8 trialists to play in these games with no intention of ever signing any of them. He said, actually, from a club perspective, that's of no benefit at all. No. I will put in the under-18s, accepting that we might end up losing a game or 2, but actually I find out more about them. I actually get to see them live. We get to see their attitude in and around the squad. Yeah. They get to understand what we want from them. I know that from speaking to Smudger, the under-18s manager, the fact that those lads have featured in the friendlies is suddenly making our under-18s a far more attractive proposition. Yes. Other players are now going to him and saying, I'm really interested in talking to you about coming to play for Hereford 18s, because they can see that there's been opportunities now, and and it's been fabulous. Getting
it's going to be unlikely throughout the season, I would have thought, that that'll get dipped into. But obviously, the positive aspect of that is Jack Tolley, obviously not really looked at by Cadiz, and Aaron Downs has said, come on, train with the first team. I think he's slightly gone over age, hasn't he? So I think he's 19 now.
No, Jack's only he's not an 18-year-old yet.
Wow, okay, even better. So get involved with the first team, and I see potential there.
But you've got someone like Harry Jones, for example, who's been another one that people have talked about a little bit. He rocked up at training with the rest of the under-18s on the Thursday before the Pegasus game, and they went, it's got a bit about him. We hadn't got a right back, so they threw him straight in at right back at Peck. You know what I mean? And you'd never have known that if you hadn't had them to come to training and have a look at. So I think that's really heartening. And like I said, actually the reality is we can take 7 subs wherever we go, Keith. You can only use 5.
Yes.
So actually, if we travel with only 5 subs, it's not the end of the world. But actually, if you can put a couple of young lads have earned the opportunity to travel with the first team,
and there are occasions when somebody gets sick or ill.
100%.
So you want a full bench.
Yeah, and 100%. So
and it gives them great experience.
So as he said, Aaron was like, we have to, as a board, I want you to know that we might be weak in the last half hour of some games early in pre-season. And we're like, well, actually, we'd rather have a look at the Hereford under-18s lads in that rather than, as I said, 7 random trialists who, reality is, we're never going to see again. So it's, I think the whole thing's been, really heartening so far. As I said, till the season starts, aren't it? Everybody's in the same boat really in terms of what's going to happen. But I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, and it certainly, however we start the season, it won't be down to a lack of hard work and a lack of planning.
I'll just break off from Chris for a moment, just as lots of us are joining minute by minute. So I'll give you the Hereford team this afternoon. In goal, Theo Richardson. Back 4 of Joseph James, Cam Candola, Will Merritt and the captain Lewis Hudson. Ahead of them will be Preston Batamo. Across the midfield from right to left, got Keziah Martin, Billy Phillips, Luke Spokes and Liam Roberts, and it's Cordy Cox up top as Hereford's number 9 this afternoon. On the bench, Jordan Williamson, Carl Hawkins, Jack Tolley, Aaron Skinner, Ollie Lewis, Harry Jones, Josh Lloyd, Coyote Shahabi, Harley Jones-Williams and Jude Gowdin. They're all under-18 players that we've been talking about. But I think
they're the ones that confuse you with no numbers, Keith.
Exactly.
Is that right?
The majority of the game will be with the first team. Of that, I am sure. But, they may get 10, 15 minutes, I would have thought, at most towards the end. But coming back to you, Chris, other things off the pitch. Blackfriars Street End. You went public at the fans forum and you were asked a question about Blackfriars Street End, and you said, "Oh well, we hope to have a discussion with the council." I mean, it's always blank piece of paper, it seems to me. But is anything to report there from the councils, or are they just saying can't do it? We haven't got the money. Whatever. I've dropped a note to them. They've got a new chief executive. Obviously, I got on very well with the previous chief executive, Paul Walker. He was an Evertonian, so there was a shared love of football, and he did appear on the Meadow End at some games last season with a couple of his friends. So I have made contact with the council because I'd like to just go and sit down and have an informal meeting with the new chief executive, really, just to say hello. But I think it is time we've got to try and be a little bit more proactive on the Blackfriars, and it is probably going to take us. It's going to be us that needs to try and be proactive and move that forward, because I don't think there's a local authority in the entire county, in the entire world, or certainly the entire country that's got the money. So I think we are going to have to be a little bit proactive about that, in terms of coming up with ideas maybe and thinking what we need to do. And it's certainly Can you do anything temporarily? Can you put something up there that, I'm not saying it, a huge seated grandstand or something, but I mean, you and I go to places up and down the country, and they have these metal terraces, or I think Worksop was a good example at the end of last season. Could you not rent or purchase, or with a buyback scheme on it, or something like that?
I think you.
So at least you got four-sided ground.
I think you could.
We have lost a bit of atmosphere.
Yeah, I think you can, and I think actually, if we had an absolute need for a fourth side, if you like.
Well, if we had an FA Cup tie, I'm sure
that's
get
a route we can go down. One of the problems is it's not just as simple as putting in the temporary stand, because you've then got to make sure you've got all the facilities to go with it, in this day and age particularly. So it is something that we've considered, and we've had a couple of conversations about temporary stands in the past, just to try and understand what it might look like. But actually my feeling is we'd rather try and do something a little bit more permanent at that end. I feel that's the way to go. How you raise the money for that is going to be part of our ongoing conversations, because you're going to have to bring in private investment for a build like that, if that makes sense. I'm not talking about private investment for the football club, but you've got to be able to fund a facility if you're looking at doing it. So we need to look at that type of thing. A temporary stand is possible. The surface at that end, we've tidied up quite a bit this summer, but it's still not fabulous, so there'd be a lot that needed to be done around that. But I wouldn't rule it out, Keith. But I have to say, at the moment, that's not what we are looking at. Well, I want to sit down and have some real conversations with the council first, because actually we need to understand whether they've got I'm trying to choose my words carefully, or get the word in right. No, not necessarily a master plan, or have they got a willingness to talk to us about us taking on taking on the Blackfriars as ourselves?
The lease.
Yeah, is that something they would consider? But I think we've probably got to go to them with potentially a vision for what we want to do with it.
That would be your responsibility then.
100%. 100%. We've got access rights at the moment, so we can use it for get in and out with Ben's equipment.
And there are grants still available.
100%. The grants for new stands and things like that. It often more relates to the accessibility options and elements. They're not actually always funding for us just a normal spectator stand, but actually I think we can probably do some jiggery pokery to make it hit the right buttons and tick the right boxes, if that makes sense. But it's definitely something. I think we had I was nearly swore then, Keith. I decided not to in the end. That would be very professional, would it? We had a pretty rotten summer last year, didn't we, on and off the field? Let's be frank about it. There was a lot that went wrong, a lot we've learned from.
I should hope so.
Yeah, we've kind of I'm hoping we've recovered. And to be fair, and I get returned, there was a lot of it that we could never have foreseen and we never have predicted, but equally it happened, so it was a disaster. I think we're in a better place now. We're a lot more together in terms of the organisational side of where we want to be. You've got Aaron and Harry who are kind of managing the football side now, and they've got a vision of where they want to go over the initial 2 years of their contract, and I hope they remain here much longer. And actually, the next step for us is really to try and improve our facility. We've obviously we've improved our medical facility this summer. We've moved the medical room from the exec club entrance to pitch side, so it's a much safer thing. We've put 2 new ladies' toilets into that facility, because that's important for our selling that room on a day-to-day basis for events and things. We put new disabled toilets in between the Meadow End and Block A, because that's important, because it wasn't good enough for our disabled fans to have to go into the end of Radford's bar, fight their way in through that door. That wasn't good enough. We're improving the ladies' facilities in Radford's. So we are looking at the things that we need to improve. We're always up against it a little bit because of the old-fashioned design of the ground and the layout, etc. But we've got to start doing things. And everybody, let's be frank, we can't ignore the big hole in the ground, almost literally, is at the Blackfriars End, isn't it? So it's definitely something that I think we can start thinking about now. We need to start thinking about.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move to hybrid system, or full-time against part-time. Spoken to Aaron Downs about it. He said, look, you have to flick the switch. If you make a decision, you've got to live with it. You can't go and do it for 2 years and then say, we'll go back to part-time. It's going to be completely ridiculous. But is there a way of increasing in stages, let's put it that way, so you become training on 3 nights a week as a stage 2? In other words, you don't go and say, right, we're going to be full-time, bang, do the whole thing. Because still in this day and age, if you play on a Tuesday, you have Wednesday off. Play on a Saturday, you have Sunday off. So it's not as if they are full-time, 7-day-a-week professionals. And it would enable, which we don't really have the luxury of at the moment, in my opinion, is on a Friday is a look towards tomorrow's game, or set pieces, things that you need to work on, and have a slightly lower key physical demand on the players to train. So you'd then be training Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
I'm going to answer this without sounding like I'm passing the buck, but you're going to say I'm passing the buck. We could go, I think I've said this before, we could go hybrid. We could have gone hybrid this season,
right?
If we'd have wanted to, if Aaron had said, if he'd have come to the board and said, I want us to go hybrid, then we would have supported the move to hybrid. The problem we would have had is we wouldn't have had any more money to spend on the hybrid wages. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if we'd have wanted to go hybrid, we'd have tried to get the training ground at Solihull for another day, morning, or whatever we want to do, or a facility of some, or move to a different facility for 3 mornings, 3 afternoons, whatever it is. But it would have had to have been done on the football budget that we had made available. So then it comes almost down to a football decision. And I think Aaron's decision was that
I just want to pay the players.
Not necessarily that, but I think he said to me, I think he might have said it at one of the fans' forums, he said you end up with the worst of the full-time players, you end up with the lower end of the full-time players.
I can see that.
And then if you go, But
I'm just thinking, as a club, I'd be impressed, but I'd also be surprised if suddenly the club flicked a switch and said, right, we're going to go fully professional next year, because we probably need average gates of 3,200 to 3,400 on a regular basis to enable that. So I think I'm just wondering if they could be able to slightly staggered approach. And you wouldn't necessarily need the same. I love Solihull Moors training ground. I think it fits the bill perfectly. Getting players in from the north, or this season a lot more from the Cheltenham and Bristol area, able to go up the M5. So it still works, and it's a great facility. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do that maybe on the Friday.
No.
You could get the players to come to the club maybe. So you're not paying the money out for the training facility on that extra day. Just a staggered approach, instead of saying we can only be part-time or we can only be full-time.
But equally, and I'm not disagreeing, because I'd love nothing more than for us to go full-time. So I'm sort of like talking about something like I'm being negative, but actually it's what I'd want more than anything in reality, and I think any of us would. But you know,
and I don't see us ever being full-time in Hereford.
No, I know
players are not going to come to Hereford.
That is one of the big issues. Is, you know,
that's an absolute
I'd love to have more sessions in Hereford, to be honest. You know, and to be fair, you know, Aaron, Adam, they were in Hereford both Saturdays at the start of the season, you know, and that sort of stuff. I think the difficulty is even if you brought them to Hereford on a Friday, you probably got to put them up on the Friday night, particularly ahead of a home game, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? You're not going to drag people in from further afield to come to Hereford on a Friday for training.
Yeah,
to go
or
you have to pay more, or you have to pay them more money to come and be willing to do that. So there are lots and lots and lots of elements to it. And like I said, I say this. I feel like I'm being negative about it, which is not well, because I would love it more than anything. The difficulty is, like a lot of things, is how you fund it, how you actually fund it to actually make it, to actually get the most out of it and actually make everything better, if you know what I mean. Because what you don't want to do is go down the route of doing it, even hybrid, but end up with a lesser player, and you might not be able to get them to the level that you get 2 nights a week. It's such a difficult thing. I mean, there is part of me at times that does feel like we're being a little bit left behind with the madness of non-league football, because they've got 5 new investors here at Bromsgrove Sporting, and their squad is clearly completely different this year in terms of who they've brought in compared to last year.
Okay, let's move quickly on to finance then. Is there any, because as far as I'm concerned, the way I read it is the initial share issue was out there, and there's still something like almost £500,000 of available shares.
Yeah.
If you wish to have a share issue.
Yeah.
You talked about Blackfriars Street End needing extra finance to be able to do that, plus grants.
Yeah.
Could you not have a share issue?
I think it's something that we really need to talk about, Keith, as a football club. I think
with a specific aspect in mind. In other words, it's not going to go down a black hole.
Yeah, I think
that's going to go.
The one thing I would say though is, if you're going to release, I can't even off the top of my head, I can't think what it is, but just say
it's about 440,000.
If you're going to release 440,000 shares, 440,000 pounds of investment, essentially is what you could bring in. You kind of almost, before you do it, you want to know it. You almost would like to know, because you might do it and then there's nobody out there to buy it.
Well, you see,
that's the thing.
You see, this
chicken and egg, you're thinking,
No. This opens up the argument about the existing shareholders who put the original 50,000 in. If they want to retain their level of percentage of shares that they have, they're going to have to increase. They're going to have to put money up to buy their shares, and then there may be others that would wish to come forward. And of course, the Supporters Trust has got just 50%.
I think the first level. I think maybe at the moment we look like we're not open to it. I think that if maybe
because you're open to squad builder, David.
Yeah, I think maybe it might be that if as a club, everybody came together, shareholders came together to say we're open to this. It might bring 1 or 2 people out of the woodwork. You never know, do you? That's probably what, at the moment. Probably people look at it and go, "Well, there's no point trying to invest in Hereford because there's no opportunity." And that might be why we haven't had anybody come to us.
And that's why you need something for the Blackfriars Street End for people to look at and say, I want to be a part of this. I'd like to get involved.
There's a project, there's
what
a
can
dream,
I do? I can help with that. Maybe, that an individual might say, look, this is my specialty. This is why you need me now to drive that thing forward. But it's all up in the air.
You're offering up some money there, Keith. Richie's man.
I have offered money. As you well know.
I know. I was only joking.
That's the Hereford United. We won't go there this afternoon. No. Otherwise, I'll be talking about that and not the match.
Absolutely. Let's. You're going to have to focus on the football shortly, aren't you? But I'm glad I've come up, Keith.
Really grateful.
I'm all the welcome. Anytime.
Pretty good.
It's any time.
We'll catch you again.
Defo.
Maybe even at Buxton.
And I'll try and remember to come up. I'll see you. And I do apologise once again for my lack of punctuality.
You can let Greg in now. He's looking anxiously over his shoulder.
No, I'm right. I don't like the old days doing this. The thing is, I can't offer an opinion anymore, Greg, can I? Not like the old days.
Well, there we are. That's the Hereford Chairman, Chris Ammonds. Really grateful for him to come up. Hopefully we'll take a recording of that and perhaps put it on the Bullscast, Radio Hereford FC.